look at another strategy, which is to shape the soil so that it will hold water. And this is something that a lot of cities are doing now. They call them bioswales. In permaculture, we just call them swales, but it's essentially a little ditch on contour, and I'll show you these that harvest water. One way to do this is what are called mulched basins. When you plant a tree, you dig a little basin around it, and you plant the tree in the center of it, and that way any rainwater that falls will be held in that basin. And if you put mulch in the basin, it'll keep the soil moist. So mulch basins are a very nice way to just contour the soil a little bit and keep the water in place. Curb cuts are something that a lot of cities are doing. I used to live in Portland, Oregon, and the city has installed curb cuts all over the place to harvest all that rainwater. And looking at Boise getting about 12 inches or so of rain in a typical year, that means on a typical street you can get about 1 million gallons per mile per year of water. And rather than letting that go into the sewer system and go away, curb cuts will help you harvest that water and get it into plants, get it into the soil, and keep it there. So we need to be thinking about water as not this thing that should go away when it rains, but we want to keep it here. And curb cuts are a really good way to do that. Just cut out sections of curb and let the water run into the soil there. Also, how we contour the land of our garden is very important. A lot of times people will build raised paths and raised beds, and in some climates that's the way to go. Really wet climates, humid climates, that helps the soil dry out and helps keep your feet dry. But in this kind of climate, if you've got raised beds, the water runs off of them, or if you have sunken paths, the water pools in the path and goes out into the street. So by reversing that, by putting sunken beds and raised paths in your yard, water that lands on the paths flows into the garden, water that lands in the garden stays in the garden and doesn't go away. So you can think of this as, rather than the path to scarcity, all the water running away, you've got the path to abundance. You're harvesting the rain rather than letting it get away from you. So that's another way that we can contour the soil, is sunken beds and raised paths. The opposite of what a lot of people are taught. There's something that's becoming very trendy these days called hugelkultur, which is German words for mound culture. And this is where you dig a trench in the ground and you put in woody matter, just old rotten firewood or logs or brush or that sort of thing, and you build it up into a mound, and then you put some soil over it. This illustration is showing sod that you've cut out of somewhere, maybe cut out from where you're building the hugelkultur bed, and you lay it down and then you put some soil on it, and then you plant into this. And what's going on is the wood down in that trench is soaking up water whenever it rains, because rotting wood is really good at holding a lot of water. And I actually helped build one of these in Montana when I was living there over the summer at a ranch we were on outside of Billings, also a very dry climate. And this was a ranch. We had a backhoe, so we dug an enormous trench that was 6 feet deep and 80 feet long. We drug some big cottonwoods that had fallen and laid those down in the trench, and then piled a bunch of brush, and then went out and got some big round bales that had rotted, 1,000 pounds of hay, and we put 6 round bales into the thing and just made this massive pile of organic matter that was 6 feet into the ground and about 5 feet high. And during the Montana winter, there was so much heat being generated by that a lot of the plants that we put on, the cover crops, the fava beans and other cover crops like that, made it through the winter just fine. And during the summer, it hardly ever needed to be irrigated because that rotting wood was holding so much water. So you don't have to make them that big. You can make them, modest in your yard. But if you got a backhoe, it's a lot of fun. But you can see here's a little more modest example of a hugelkultur bed. But it's holding water, and as the organic matter, as the wood in it breaks down, it's releasing nutrients, and it's good habitat for our fungal friends. So it's doing a whole bunch of things as well. Then in permaculture, we talk a lot about swales, which is simply a trench. Can be 8 inches or a foot deep, or you can make them deeper if you're working with a large piece of land. But it's laid out on contour. It's level, in other words. It's like a long, skinny pond. And the idea is that rainwater comes down slope, runoff water, and hits the swale and spreads out, slows down, sinks into the ground rather than creating gullies. And it's a really good way to do erosion control. And just here are a couple of illustrations of fairly large-scale swales. Again, these are farm-scale swales, and you can put much smaller ones into your yard. But you can see the one on the right has caught a whole bunch of water that's come off that slope, and it's spreading it out and sinking it into the soil. And what's going on is that water then goes down into the soil, down slope of the swale, and nourishes the roots of the plants there, and those plants get bigger because they're getting more water, and they add more organic matter to the soil because the roots are getting bigger, and then they can hold more water, and then more water comes in from the swale, and it's this nice kind of positive feedback loop of things just get greener and lusher downslope of the swale over time. And I put in swales in very dry climates, and it's amazing how much greener things are right below them than before the swale was there. They really work in dry climates. You can combine a swale and hugelkultur in this illustration where someone has put a hugelkultur bed on the downslope side of a swale. So we're stacking functions here. We're combining a couple of different ways of doing things and then planting a nice little food forest on the downslope side of the swale with its roots going into the wood of the hugelkultur. So we can combine these techniques if we want. So, okay, so let's look at some of the benefits of contouring soil to hold water. So it slows and spreads water out, keeps it in the ground. It can reduce erosion because the water is not forming a gully, it's spreading out and slowing down. It increases planting area. You know, we've all heard the story of how a hilly acre gives you more land than a flat acre, and it does the same thing with contouring the soil. You get more land to garden in per square foot by making it bumpy. You get nice little microclimates. Down in the swale, it's cool and moist, or it's shady on the downslope side of the berm near the swale, so you get all these different microclimates, so you can grow different kinds of plants. And that means that it increases habitat. Lots of different sorts of birds and butterflies and critters like that will be able to find places that they enjoy in all these different microclimates. It catches any organic matter, leaves and things that are rolling downhill. It'll grab those. It makes the yard more interesting when you've got contours in it. So you've got a whole bunch of things coming along with contouring the soil to hold water.